Are you ready? All right, we'll call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock. Commissioner Morhorse has been excused. Happy to the agenda in the back. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from May 10th?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have with us today Paul Teagan from BLM. Paul, please join us here. State your name for the record. You're one of the people.
A cup of coffee.
You're one of the people I've only met on Zoom. So you are an actual three-dimensional human.
And you the same. Good morning, commissioners and support staff of the county. Paul Teagan, I'm the Mary's Peak Field Manager for the BLM. Is it too loud? No, it'll pick you up. Okay. Thanks for the invitation to come today and talk about BLM's work in the county. I do have some handouts that I sent to you if you are interested in a paper copy. Does anyone else? I've got a bunch if people want to see. Yeah, of course. When I hit print, it's public information, so anybody's welcome to it. The initial motivation for coming today was just to give a little update on the gooseneck community and some of BLM's management there, but has been a while since we sat down and talked about BLM's program across the county. So I just thought I'd use this as an outline and hopefully keep it pretty informal. If you guys have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt and ask about what interests you from BLM's perspective. Just a quick start at the top to let you know, we do have a new acting district manager. His name's Dennis Teitzel. His permanent station is as the Prineville district manager and is here for at least 120 days. We've currently flown the district manager position to be filled, and my understanding is that the Bureau hopes to have someone in place permanently by the end of the summer, but as a senior leadership position within the organization certainly takes some time to fill. So we're happy to have Dennis here. A lot of fire experience and has spent time in a number of different states for BLM, so well experienced. In terms of Polk County, I think you guys know we're not the largest land manager in the county. You've got industrial timber landowners who have significantly more land than BLM manages, but at 40,000 acres, that's about the same as BLM has in your county to the south in Benton County, which is also in Mary's Peak. But the real difference of the Polk County BLM managed lands is the amount of harvest land base. There's certainly late successional reserves that we manage for long-term habitat growth, riparian reserves that are focused on Clean Water Act, adherence to the Clean Water Act and fisheries benefit. But for the most part, a pretty good chunk of the land that we manage is harvest land base, and we'll talk about that as we work through the sheet. I think the number one thing just to talk about gooseneck, I've given you a bit of a narrative, but we face two issues there related. And in terms of the amount of public activity we get in that recreation area, in and of itself can be difficult for the BLM to manage in terms of conflicting uses, and certainly people who use the land in a way that maybe the neighbors necessarily aren't in love with. And so even perfectly legal recreational target shooting can be a noise nuisance and things like that if you're down the valley. But I think what we've seen an uptick in over the last couple of years is also illegal target shooting practices that include Well, what's necessarily dangerous about it or illegal about it is maybe automatic weapons use, using natural resources like timber as a backdrop, going so far as to try and use automatic weapons to cut down timber. We certainly have seen evidence of that. And then also just shooting in a way where you don't have a safe backstop. So if you can imagine that gooseneck area, and if you flip to the back, you see the map. Looking to the north, it's all downhill from there. And if you choose to, shoot a 30-30 or some other high-powered rifle, even a perfectly legal high-powered rifle, off one of those landings, and you don't hit your target, and you don't hit a tree, the bullet's going to land somewhere. And we've heard increasing concerns from our neighbors about that. So outside of fire season, we have done more work up there just recently, talking to the neighbors and trying to use signs to tell people this is not a safe place to shoot a high-powered weapon. Maybe it looks safe because there's trees there, but the trees aren't supposed to be used for a backdrop, and the trees don't take up as much space as you would think. And so people shoot thinking they've got a safe backstop.
Is that a safety suggestion, or is that actually illegal to shoot those?
At this point, if you were to be shooting there, and this brings up the enforcement challenge of it, if you were to be shooting there, you could be cited, because that is a violation of both Oregon state law and federal law about discharging a firearm in an unsafe manner. We haven't gone as far as putting in some sort of target shooting ban across the gooseneck area, which is a possibility under our resource management plan, but we haven't gone that far. What we've been trying to do is, in lieu of having someone on patrol all the time in that area, sign the location so people can understand, okay, this isn't a good place to be doing this. There are still some safe spots if you face south and find a backdrop, but I think the kinds of target shooting that people enjoy isn't necessarily that short distance. Maybe they want to practice, shooting their pistol or something like that, but there's not much. I don't know how to say it exactly, but to shoot a 30-30, 20 yards isn't really the thrill that they're looking for. So I think put that recreation use kind of in aside, and we can talk about how that dovetails into the fire season and some of the changes that we've made on the landscape. And then we'll kind of pick them back up. The map on the back is really intended to show where we have installed gates on the Gooseneck and Gold Creek roads. And also, I wanted to highlight for you, and I produced this map for some of our neighbors as well, the sort of purplish splotches that you see on the map to the north of the gooseneck. Those are just representations of the value of each structure is given a splotch, and as more and more structures get together, the splotches get darker in color. So it just shows kind of a housing density or a structure density. And when I look at my field office, this is a pretty unique setup in terms of the number of structures that are close to a recreation area like Gooseneck. And we have a history of fires starting on this part of the landscape. One that started from target shooting, not on BLM land, the year before I came in 2014, I believe. We did have a fire start near the Mill Creek Park on Labor Day 2020. That was West Oregon ODF was able to manage that, thankfully.
The cause of that, when was that?
I think I'm supposed to say it's still under investigation, but it was human cause. And we also had a pile that was started on fire, it was scheduled to be burned at some point from one of our timber sales, but it was started on fire before that. And if you go up on Gooseneck, there's other piles that just looked like bonfires waiting to be burned. So I think with the change in the amount of the fire seasons that we've seen over the last couple of years, we have, when fire season has gotten to that extreme level, I'm not talking about like on the 4th of July when fire season starts, but maybe a month later, we have instituted additional fire closures on the Gooseneck specifically. It's the only place on the Northwest Oregon district that we've been doing it. That we close this area to overnight camping. We close this area to discharging a firearm except in the legal pursuit of game. And I'll be honest that those restrictions, they look good on paper, but they haven't had the intended effect on the ground of mitigating fire danger or behaviors that could lead to a fire. And so that's really the motivation to install these gates. And if we get to that sort of extreme fire danger, or last year, I think part of our motivation was we were very low on resources. Even if it wasn't the most fire danger we had seen in Polk County in the last 5 years, there were not sufficient resources in the wildland firefighting system to that I felt confident if we had a significant start on this landscape that we would be able to get a team and get enough initial attack resources on it. So if that continues into the future, that'll probably be part of a motivating factor for restricting access to this site. When I met with the neighbors a couple of weeks ago, all of this sounded very good to them. I think that it'll be different the day that we decide that we need to restrict access to this site and close these gates. I know that there's a lot of people who maybe have seen the gates go in or haven't seen it or will be surprised the day they aren't able to access this site. But we don't have the ability to close those gates for any other reason except extreme fire danger. And that's the only reason we would close them. Maybe I'll stop there for a sip of coffee and see if commissioners have any questions so far.
I can't even tell you where to begin with regard to this gate issue. It's a hot topic, and I hope that you are ready and willing to answer the questions from constituents about how, why, when, et cetera. Because I want to make certain that people understand we don't have decision-making authority here.
Right.
But I will weigh in at least in as much as I support a gated process for extreme fire danger. I don't support a restricted access policy for your lack of resources.
Right.
I don't support that.
Right.
And all the reasons why. We've talked about it, but for the record, I will say that's part of your responsibility is to get those resources. And so cutting off public access because of that will be a challenge that I will not be able to support you well on. And I will tell the state the same thing. So that's going to be a problem for all of us. But when fire danger is, I've always been a supporter of that. When fire danger is so high, and we have 100-degree temperatures and that sustain for a long period of time, et cetera. Absolutely, I get that. And we have to use these tools sometimes to help people understand why they can't be there. Excuse me. And I do get that. I mean, there's plenty of other times where they can get there. And as somebody who represents private lands as well,
right,
in my own family, again, there are times when we've had to restrict people's use of private lands in our own land base just to make certain that it's protected because we can't insure everything. And clearly, all of this land, whether public or private, is not insured for this kind of thing generally. So, I do support it on that basis. I'm always committed to trying to help come up with a plan for better resource management.
You know, and you're going to talk more about the law enforcement side of things. And I've been a huge proponent of that and want to continue to help in that way. But we probably should be having more direct conversations about the needs for your resources for fire protection and fire management. If that's going to be an internal policy that is developed because of the lack of, then we really need to work harder on that. But I'm also all about trying to find a way to help educate people better. I'm curious about whether or not there's a process in mind for doing some community listening sessions, if you will, for more than just the local landowners. And I'm sensitive, or homeowners. I'm sensitive to their concerns. I hear about them, and I've been out there and I've seen the challenges, and I concur with all of their concerns. But at some point, we have to help the rest of the public who we as electeds take a lot of browbeating from over policies that you folks engage and we are powerless in.
Right. Yeah, let me kind of respond in just to each concern in order. I think on the resources side, to make it clear what our concerns were last summer, was more of like a national, the fire season was so extreme across the entire Western United States that we were at what we call preparedness level 5 for a record amount of time. And so I think I don't want to confuse that with how well supported we feel by ODF and the Western Oregon Operating Plan and our ability to provide those firefighting resources locally. I think we managed that really well with Jeff Clausen and with Michael, with Michael Kern at ODF. So I don't want to create the impression that that's where the issue is. And I think that there's movement nationally to improve our wildland firefighter capacity, which firefighting capacity, which is really outside of my realm of expertise, but in terms of those big national policy questions, but there's a lot happening there. I just think last year was particularly stressful after 45 or 50 days at that PL5 level. So I appreciate what you say about the lack of resources and what that might take, but I just also want to be clear about from where I sit, what the lack of resources was in that case. And I like your idea about engaging more of the public than just the neighbors in terms of why we might close those gates, when we might close those gates. And it seems to me that the time for that to be most effective isn't necessarily the day we close the gate, but maybe the start of fire season. You know, when people are having that, it's really hard to talk to people about fire when it's after the spring we've had, right? There's just too much water. They don't take it seriously. And so I think that I'll take that under advisement because I think that would be a good meeting to have, and where to have that, how to have it is probably worth some pondering internally. So
Happy to help you in that regard.
thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think it is and we can talk about it with the sheriff's agreement and some of the other cooperative management that we do with Polk County, what I call cooperative management. I think it's really important that people understand they've got a couple different ways to express and you know, I think we went through this a number of years ago with Ronco Road, right? When that gate went up and people saw that, and I didn't have any authority at that point to keep the gate open. And on the flip side, we've seen less resource damage because that was an area that was pretty well damaged, but the public land part of management that I do, I don't like the idea of cutting off access to public land. It's against our culture. It's against our legal mandate. And so we don't take the decision to close gates even temporarily lightly. We'll move into some of these other topics, and they might dive back in towards fire season and other issues like up on the gooseneck. But the update on the Polk County Sheriff's agreement, you're probably aware that the timberland owners pooled funds together in order to hire a woods deputy. That person did a great job in the position and left the county to for greener pastures, I suppose. The county isn't able to fill that position because of financial, federal financial rules to begin with. We were always sending a separate stream of money to the sheriff's office apart from those timberland owners. That money is still available to the sheriff in order to spend. And our new law enforcement officer, supervisory law enforcement officer, his name's Damian Hayes. He's been working with the command staff of Polk County in order to ensure that they understand the terms of how that money can be spent. So our goal between now and fire season is to offer that as sort of chunks of overtime for the sheriff's office if they can spend that as they will. And we've given them places focusing mostly on gooseneck in order to do patrol.
Have you maintained conversations with Sheriff Carton on this? Has that gone well?
My understanding, Damian has been doing all the conversations with the sheriff and it's gone very well.
Good.
Yeah. So we actually expect to add some funding to that agreement just so there's enough to get through the entire summer. And then kind of turning the page, some of these other agreements that we have, specifically with community corrections that end up doing a lot of great work out on BLM land. Dump Stoppers has some BLM specific funding that it's working through, and then it has another pocket of funding from the Resource Advisory Council, the Title II dollars. So that agreement is well funded for a couple of years, and that'll be always a big help to BLM. Similarly, we do have some money to do what we call manual maintenance, which is as pretty as we can make pulling weeds sound. So manual maintenance of weeds, but I think we'll be focusing on doing trash cleanups as opposed to weed stopping. I'm not sure we call it weed stoppers. That's just what I decided to call it for this purpose of this briefing. After some haranguing and back and forth, we do have, I won't say a long-term agreement, but we have a multi-year agreement with the county to maintain Mill Creek Park, which is very good. And I think that kind of, as I said here with Weyerhaeuser opening up some of their lands outside of fire season to the green dot system, we certainly something we're keeping an eye on just in terms of how much use that park gets. I did reach out to Public Works, but wasn't able to get a response before the meeting in terms of where we're at on the Black Rock Access Road, the FLAP grant, in order to do those improvements outside of Falls City. Certainly still support those, that they meet a BLM need in terms of mitigating the impacts of timber haul near the Little Lucky Mute Creek. So we would hope that that keeps moving forward and seeing those improvements in due course.
I believe it's scheduled for next construction season.
Next construction season, which is great. That's awesome. Part of one of our arguments for that, we in the Mary's Peak field office, we try really hard to make great marketable timber sales, and something that makes our timber sales more marketable is when we're able to offer year-round haul. But if the way that we do that is by looking at places where our haul would have an impact to, critical fish habitat, and paving this part of the Black Rock Access Road is sort of the last point. So if that gets paved when we offer timber sales that utilize the Black Rock Access Road, we can construct those so they have year-round haul, and then we end up getting a better price for them. Speaking of our timber sales, I guess I'll just kind of give the quick overview is that over the last 2 years, the Mary's Peak field office has worked almost exclusively in the burn area of the Beachy Creek fire. We have a mandate under the ONC Act and our RMP to try to get as much salvage out of burned harvest land base as we can. And so that's been our single task as a timber resource outfit for the last 2 years. We've been able to achieve and exceed all of our timber sale targets doing that work, both in salvage, which is going after burned timber that was, in the harvest land base, and through danger tree removal, working along roads to remove trees that present a danger to the road. And I'm really proud of our team in those efforts. We have done multiple timber sales, multiple danger tree removal contracts, and we haven't faced any legal challenges on that work at all. So to exceed our targets, to do it without appeals or any other type of legal challenge, I think speaks to the professionalism of the team. That hasn't been the case across the landscape. There have been a lot of salvage and danger tree removal projects that haven't gone forward, but all of ours have gone forward. Our last danger tree or salvage sale will take place on May 25th, and actually on May 25th and May 26th, the Northwest Oregon District, I think, is going to be offering like over 75 million board feet of timber. So those 2 days will be quite a record for our part of the state. Last year, Northwestern Oregon wide, we sold more timber by volume than we have since 1992. So kind of maybe the flip side of working in those fire scars from 2020, but the team's been working quite hard on it. With that, we'll be refocusing our efforts in the actual Mary's Peak Field office in Polk and Benton and Lincoln County. But for the most part, our harvest land-based activities will all be in Polk County. So we have one new sale in the Gooseneck Irma called Mustang Ranch, and we anticipate offering that next fiscal year. We will offer a series of sales, in the heart of the timberlands, the Central Boulder project and the Little K project areas. And then Teal Creek is pretty close to Falls City, just southwest of there. We sold one of those sales to Freris, and they have utilized their salvage credits to push out operating that sale. So we have the ability, if our purchasers have salvage work to do, we can offer them extensions on their existing green contracts. So we pushed out those contracts so they could focus on the salvage, and then they'll come back and operate on that Teal Creek project. And then we have another project there, Teal of a Deal, which will sell not next year, but the year after. All said and done, Mary's Peak's contribution to the is usually between 20 and 25 million board feet a year, and 17 million of that is usually harvest land base, and another 7 is usually out of our late successional reserve in terms of thinning projects for putting those stands on a trajectory for being having more old growth characteristics. I also brought a map of Polk County that hangs up in my wall, because I was, thinking, well, I'm going to see the Polk County Commissioners, and if something hangs on my wall, maybe they want to see it. But it's about access to the Valley of the Giants, and just in terms of what that road system looks like. We've done a lot of analysis of what does it take to get to the Valley of the Giants. And I know we're short on time, but if you want to have more conversations about that and, take a look at that, I think it shows what the challenges are. It's certainly our number one public access issue on Mary's Peak, but clearly it's almost one of the number one public access challenges in the entire state, just because of the amount of private land ownership and number of different private landowners between the last point of public access and the place people want to get to. So
Did you analyze, just curious, the more north Black Rock route versus Valsette's? Because there are fewer private landowners on that other route.
There are, and when the Black Rock kind of picks up the S line, it becomes a much more difficult route for the public to travel. And so the Valsette's route is already a very confusing road. And putting people through on the S line would be, I think, an even in the era of, well, probably actually more in the era of Google Maps. When people think they know where they're going and Google thinks they know where they're going, yeah, they don't end up where they want to be.
I know you guys were trying to make some improvements there. I don't know if you got any traction with Google.
Yeah,
You can knock on the door.
Yeah, you would think we'd have more push and pull with that multinational organization, but it turns out we don't. So, well, that was again a lot. I'll stop for a sip of coffee. And do you guys have questions on either our work with the county or the timber sale program? Happy to entertain.
I have a number, so.
Why don't you go ahead?
All right.
No.
So tell us about what the BLM ODF contract looks like right now, and give us strong assurance that ODF, Oregon Department of Forestry Fire, is going to actually continue to protect our BLM lands.
The Western Oregon operating plan in place this year, in place next year. My understanding is that our current agreement expires June 1st, 2024. And so the negotiations to continue that moving forward are between the state forester and our BLM state director, Barry Bichoux. And all indications, which is all I'm given at my level of the organization, is that those conversations are going very well. And there's a very cooperative spirit. So for the timing that we have, it feels good. And we continue to work closely with ODF. We had a great preseason meeting last Friday across the district, just, managers, fire managers, everyone being on the same page for what the season looks like. So looks good.
So in the nature of the conversation about potentially restricting access based on resources, you have to ask then, what does that conversation about firefighter workforce pipeline look like?
Yeah.
Because we are reading that information right now from the state and other private contractors that they're having one heck of a time hiring people for this firefighting season. So do you have a sense of what that looks like right now?
Yeah, let me start locally. I talked with Michael Curran just in the last couple of weeks to know what does our firefighting capacity look like in West Oregon, and that would serve the Mary's Peak field office. They've been able to hire every position on their engines and their crews. And so we feel really good locally. I think the things that you're reading about and that I'm reading about are true. And it feels like, is there someone who works for HR in this room? It's just, it's HR worldwide, it feels like, or nationwide. There's not, we're having a really hard time finding capable people for forest tech positions, not even firefighting, right? And so I'm heartened to know that we've got good folks that are being trained and will be fully staffed right here on the West Oregon ODF district and for Mary's Peak. Yeah, I think that the rest of it feels really, we're just in a tough spot.
And the reality is that though they're assigned West Oregon, they can be reassigned. And in fact, they generally are moved to other hotspots. So, and it can leave us again with nothing.
Yeah.
And my 27 years in the fire service here, promising local communities that they have fire protection during the hot summer months is often a misnomer at best. Because we send our firefighting crews, structural firefighting crews out to these hotspots as well.
Right.
And leave communities more vulnerable.
Yeah, I hear and share your concern. I think
Well, it's just reality. I just want to make certain that nobody's being blind to that. Yeah, well, we may be hiring people at ODF, but that doesn't mean they'll be here.
Right. And I think what I think it's important to know is that certainly as the fire season ticks up we've got an operating plan, and both the timberland owners, BLM, ODF, we're having especially in those really high fire danger times, weekly coordination calls, and there's at least some input from private timber landowners, from BLM about what resources are being sent off and what's being held back. We, over the last 4 years, have built a really strong Northwest Oregon interagency fire management program. So that's the Willamette National Forest, BLM, Siuslaw National Forest, and some Fish and Wildlife Service units. And having that interagency group at this scale gives us sort of like a homegrown access to the Willamette. Willamette really is kind of the big organization in that group, but they maintain lots of crews and things like that. And so in the past, like I guess that fire was in Benton County a couple of years ago, but like in the Fall Creek fire that we had, we were able to pull crews off of the Willamette and put those right there. So we have about 300 employees on the Northwest Oregon district, both in Eugene, Springfield, Salem, Tillamook, and 125 of those employees are red carded firefighters. You're right. They go out. They're a national resource, especially in times of shortage, but we also have the ability as managers to hold some of them back when the time comes when, they might be needed locally. So.
Also want to ask about the Resource Advisory Council.
Yeah.
And what's happening.
I should have pressed our former acting district manager, Elizabeth, for some information before coming today. My understanding is that I think our ability to reach a quorum has ended, and that we've put out a call for nominations so that you would know better than I would, but I think there's still an interest in having enough people nominated and put in place so there could be meetings in August and September, I think is what the last thing I heard. But similarly, I think it's been difficult recruiting, people to come into the Resource Advisory Council, partly because from what I've heard from people who I've encouraged to apply and have gone through it, is it's difficult to get vetted. The vetting process takes a lot of time and people just don't know where it's at or anything like that. So certainly the goal is to get a fully functional RAC, and primarily for the ability to award those Title II dollars.
Yeah. Well, it also, for the record, has to do with fees, user fees.
Yeah.
And recreation areas.
Right.
And also for the record, I'm going to state that I've had my name in for nomination and reelection to the RAC for, I think, my third round since September. So for the record, for people that are listening and watching, I have been trying, not your fault, but I'm putting it on the record.
Right.
The bureaucratic nonsense that all of us as nominees or potential nominees have to go through is beyond ridiculous. And again, September, my name's been in for reappointment to this RAC. And I have support of my peers at the ONC Association. I have support from my peers at the Association of Oregon Counties. I believe I still have support from my fellow commissioners. And I've now been waived from a meeting that happened that barely had quorum. And I protested that because the electeds that need to be in there's three categories. The electeds weren't all there. And I was one of them that wasn't there because my term had expired. And so, it is very frustrating to me as well. And especially as we're having conversations about access to public lands and recreation fees, et cetera, that we're not all there. And I don't know how we fix this problem, Paul, but we've got to get a message to this administration in DC. This is not okay. We want to be engaged in these conversations. We need to be engaged in them. And when that process takes as much time as it does, you're circumventing the public input.
Right.
And that is not okay with me. And I take that job very seriously for all of these projects that you're talking about in Polk County. And I've been very diligent in participating in them, and I'm being kept from that job. And so I've again, a message to you.
I will And I commit to
Yeah.
delivering that.
And I know Elizabeth had been too, and, you know, I know that, you know, she heard that, but one of the frustrations that we can all share is that, so I said to Elizabeth these things, and now she's not in that position anymore. And so, and so there is, hopefully you aren't going anywhere anytime soon, but we never know if you're going to move on to a higher position. So, you know, that we just got to find a way to keep amplifying this message back to people at the head office and to the secretary that I don't understand why this takes so long, especially for somebody who's been sitting on the committee, unless it's political. Unless it's political. That's the only thing I can come up with because my qualifications and credentials have not changed.
Right.
I don't need to be vetted as thoroughly as someone who's never sat on the committee before. So it's a mystery and I don't get it and we need to fix it. So I'm saying this for the benefit of my constituents that are wondering, why don't we have a voice? And again, the RAC is one place, is one small portion. It's not the solution for everything in public communications.
Right.
But again, I also sit as an officer in the ONC Association, and you know that, and continue to make the protests from the county level on roads and, you know, how we maintain and manage roads, fire access, et cetera, from that level. This is a very challenging and difficult relationship. And again, you're wonderful and I appreciate working with you. And so are the local folks, but the bureaucracy that we're all having to deal with is beyond understandable.
Yeah, and I, with all due respect, absolutely understand what you're saying and share in many of your frustrations. And so I think that I appreciate just coming here and having the conversation because this is the part we can continue to do and continue to find ways to work cooperatively within the county, you know, at this level, so it makes the most sense it possibly can. And we may share in frustrations about things that are outside of our control, but as long as we've got this going as well, that feels good to me. If we were having a hard time here, which, you know, we've had like with the Mill Creek thing, you know, like can't get the puzzle pieces to fit together. I don't want to stack frustration on frustration. You know, if we can get some things to work right at this level, it's good. And we can both, you know, everyone understand, well, there's some things that are out of our control that we'll continue to push the rock up the hill and see if it gets better.
And then finally, I'm concerned about where we're actually heading. And I wish the sheriff were in the room because I don't fully understand where we are with regard to law enforcement on BLM lands.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that Damian Hayes has a responsibility here, but I'm guessing he's not doing any kind of patrol or law enforcement.
Right.
Is that accurate?
No, Damian does do patrol. So I'll give you what our current law enforcement status looks like. We have this on our approved TO. How about that? Our, you know, what it's supposed to look like is one supervisor and then one ranger per field office. We currently, and so that would be 6 in total. We currently have
In the state.
no, Northwest Oregon
Oh,
District.
Northwest Oregon.
I'm only talking about Northwest Oregon District. So Damian, right now we have 5 out of those 6. And we have the 2 rangers in Salem are sharing patrol between the Cascades field office, the Tillamook field office, and Mary's Peak. And then we have Damian, no, I'm sorry. We have 4 out of the 6. And then Damian and Ray are based out of Springfield. We're flying to hire the other 2 rangers in the next couple of months. We're sort of in the queue in HR. So our goal is to have a fully functional 6-person law enforcement staffing. And then we also spend a considerable amount of funds supporting our county partners across the Northwest Oregon District. So Clackamas, Marion, Lynn Lane, Benton, Polk, Yamhill, Tillamook, I think are the ones that we have our partners are similar to this one, our partners with. So it's just, maintaining that patrol it's remarkable what goes out on our public lands. And so to have those law enforcement capabilities is really important. And we're working as a district to make sure we maintain a level of service there because we need it.
And is the Gooseneck area one of the hot spots for that behavior? Is that what I understood you saying?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think in terms of the things that happen out at Gooseneck in terms of, illegal and unwise firearm usage. Certainly we have folks who are overextending their stay, people who are experiencing homelessness and seek public lands as a refuge and then end up, not necessarily living by the leave no trace principle. And so that creates another management, managing homelessness across the Northwest Oregon district is a big amount of our law enforcement's work. It's moving people, then getting the resources to them, then cleaning up what's left behind. Takes a lot of work. So we see that there too, not just on BLM land, but on, our neighbors' private timberlands. So
Throughout the district, you're seeing that.
yeah, and at Gooseneck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gold Creek, Gooseneck, Newman Road, that whole area.
I think my interest in maintaining access to public lands and also understanding the need to mitigate risk to the property. And this commission has given me permission to convene partners again as a commissioner to look at Valley of the Giants access. So perhaps we can have some conversations with stakeholders as well about the Gooseneck area and really bring people together on that. We had almost very close to consensus for engagement through Oregon Solutions, but I think we can do it on a more natural, forum.
Yeah,
Thank you for all of your work with Fall City on that
absolutely.
in the past, and we'll be in touch about conversations.
Well, the BLM was required under the Dingle Act to identify places that we needed public access to. And it also opened up a forum for the public to express their interest of BLM land they wanted to be able to get to. And Valley of the Giants was the #1 location for our field office. So we'll continue to move forward, even though some days that it doesn't look like there's a road up the cliff, but
We'll be, I was advised to, convene some county departments and just create a proposal to the private landowners to hopefully get them to the table and talk about concerns. It was my sense that they didn't want to engage through Oregon Solutions, but wanted to engage.
Great.
So hopefully that's still the case.
yeah, well, we are ready to join at the table.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to spend time with you.
All right, any non-listed items? Hearing none, we are adjourned.